I'm staring at one of your marketing pieces, and it says mission. 1 million people made free through self-sustaining jobs. Every purchase you make gives hope and opportunity for a life made free. 1 million people. I mean, that is no small task.
Yeah.
And, and as I said to you last time we spoke, you told me how long you've been working at this, and I said you're going to be an overnight success.
I would love that overnight success. Maybe that night's coming soon. It's been a long journey because we're dealing with um, ingrained behaviors of consumerism. I did research on this. People will not just support a cause, buy a product because it does good or it helps people. We are selfish buyers as consumers. We want products that we want. We want what we want. We want it to be the right price. We want to have all the bells and whistles that we want. And we have to have that. If we have all that and it does good in the world, well, that just takes them over the top. And that was the whole intention of the product and the branding, is that I wanted people to go, wow, I really like that bag. But they like other bags, right? So our bag next to many others, like, okay, here's 10 really great backpacks. I don't know which one to buy. But what I want them to think about is beyond the bag and think, well, this one isn't just a bag. This is a mission. This is a movement. I want to be part of that. So it's an easy decision now, because I got what I wanted in terms of price and quality, but now I can do even more with this purchase that's even bigger and more important than the bag itself. My wife and I started the company 12 years ago out of a deep desire to impact what we would say, and I think most people would agree, that one of the biggest atrocities in human history, and that's slavery. So when we looked at that topic, we saw that it was directly tied to poverty, and the fashion industry was probably the largest contributor to the problem. So that was kind of the burning issue that we just couldn't ignore. Before that, though, I was working in the automotive manufacturing space, but I got to a place in my life where I just wanted to do more. I wanted my job and I wanted a for-profit business, be in the for-profit world, and actually have some significant impact on the world in a good way. And it wouldn't be a sideline to do good. It would be part of a DNA of a company. This was highlighted in a book called Super Corp that I read 15 years ago. So I saw kind of the writing on the wall of a trend in business in general, and then linking that together with this huge monster problem of slavery. So those were the two things that kind of came together.
Because I think the market clearly needs what you're doing. I have to give you the shameless plug because
Nice.
as much as your vision for the business is incredibly thoughtful and it's very deep in its thought, I think that's transcended and translated directly into the quality and thoughtfulness of the design. This is one of the easiest bags I've ever used for work, meaning it actually helped me be productive. And knowing that and the thoughtfulness in the design and where the money's going back to makes this an incredibly important purchase. And so I'm really curious around how the audience is responding to the promise.
If you look at the comments on our website and reviews, it'll really hit that home. But largely what they're saying is, I really love the product, kind of what you said. I love the function and the product and the quality. But I like even more the impact and the vision and the mission behind it. So it's that double benefit.
In an age where the employees, especially for HR, where it's become more and more important for the younger market, these stories matter to them. Do you see a shift in some of the resistance with these corporations that you're talking to? I mean, in terms of the story, in terms of what matters to their employees and how that impacts hiring practices and potential.
Absolutely. That is one of my favorite things to talk about. There's data from one of the major consulting firms that say 88% of millennials express the desire to only work for an employer that shows measurable impact in doing good in the world. And basically what they're also saying is if I don't see tangible proof of doing good in the world, I'm going to go work somewhere else. So now we're talking recruitment and retention. And I would argue that if you asked any CEO, what is one of your biggest pain points right now? They would say recruitment and retention. Because as we all know, that's very expensive to recruit and retain or lose somebody. So if you really want to talk money, then let's help your bottom line in the most important area and stop penny pinching in the areas that compromise who you are. And we're seeing this ring true. I talk to a lot of millennials and now Gen Z, and they're making it very clear. Like their basic attitude is, hey, if you're just going to give me a cheap pen or a t-shirt or hat or whatever that I really don't want, please just keep it. I don't want landfill. Don't send me landfill.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's starting, the shift is starting to change. And now with millennials in the C-suite, they're starting to make some decisions on this, and we're seeing that.
Absolutely. I just want to interject just on this little point. Jamie, like at the Fabulous, we've been sort of brainstorming about like what happens when somebody receives a promo product. If you're sending somebody something, whether it be a t-shirt or bag, we came up with something for the Fabulous, was it brand positive, brand neutral, or brand negative? Because like you said, some of these things, if I get an item that is of that nature, it is a throwaway, it is something that I wouldn't be proud to keep. Now you have not only said something, it has had a negative impact on your brand. And I don't know that people are really aware of the nature of impact that a promo item that you give away. So a company may unthinkingly say, just get me cheap pen, and just send but that decision that you made and put out there in the world on branding on every level, I mean, that's a touch point, has now
negatively impacted
your brand.
And so if you think a little startup like ours, the Fabulous, we're really proud that your brand and your products represent the Fabulous in our brand. And I don't think we could have started with a better decision. When it comes down to it, if we're self-promoting and we need a vendor and we need a product to do that, which is exactly what we needed, and we found you, that perfectly aligns with our agenda, and we couldn't afford not to start that way. So I think people who want to make excuses about the money really aren't strategic in how they're buying.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it gets down to what is the DNA of your company, and if your DNA or your company is really built from the ground up on doing good in the world and providing true value holistically in everything that you do, if that's really your DNA, then it's an easy decision to only work with suppliers and partners that support that. But if your DNA is, oh yeah, we're the most efficient and we're the most profitable and we're the fastest growing, and it's all about revenue and shareholder value and all that, then you're going to compromise in this area because your DNA does not support it. It's a tricky business. And what's happening, what I'm finding, my experience is I'm getting distributors in the promo space saying, I love what you're all about. This timing is perfect. Just like you guys are saying, can you give me a quote? Can you get me a sample? So we've done a lot of sampling, a lot of quotes, a lot of proposals. And though it's getting better, I still get I find out there's a lot of pushback. So what typically the way a scenario goes is that a major corporation says, yeah, we're all about ESGs. We're all about corporate social responsibility. We want story. We want to impact the environment for good, all that. And then they see the proposal and they go, we only have a budget of $5. And it's like, yeah, that's not going to work, and we have some like $8 items. Okay. We can get down below $10 with some nice little quality items, even as low as maybe 6 or 7 in some cases if the volume's there. But we're not going to match the price of something that's made in a very different way and supports a very different labor practice. And I also think that people are confusing, they're getting hung up on materials only. They're saying, okay, I care about sustainability. So they can buy something made out of 100% organic or recycled poly, or it's 20% recycled plastic bottles, or it's got some bamboo in it. So they go, oh my gosh, this product is so sustainable. But they've never asked the question about the labor practices.
Yeah.
So sweatshop could be making something out of bamboo, and it packaged all beautiful and has all this nice messaging around the materials, but they're not dealing with what I would argue is a more important topic, and that's sustainability of the livelihood of the worker, the maker. And so we're having to educate the industry. If they really do care, they're going to have to shift their priorities, and they're going to have to think differently about this. And instead of getting, 10,000 cheap t-shirts that end up in the trash because no one wants to wear them, they need to rethink that and maybe get half as many items that'll actually be used by their client and give them great brand exposure.
For urbanites out there and for young people that are, style savvy, it has the function. It also has the style and the quality. And then, of course, you're really happy to, have that made-free story there.
One thing I want to add is that why bags? Because there's a lot of other products we could have gone into in the fashion world. And the reason we picked bags was two main reasons. One, it's a fairly low startup cost in terms of, capital. But more importantly, it's visual, and it's a tool for conversations and sharing. So like if we made undergarments or socks or something like that, you wouldn't have someone telling a story while they're in line at the coffee shop because someone said, hey, I like that backpack. Where'd you get it? Now the consumer becomes the advocate.
The bonanza of certification programs that now exist in the world, and large corporations, I understand they're rushing to get certified, and they're rushing to get those certifications rolled out through their supply chain. And by the time it gets to our category, which is, as marketing procurement professionals will tell you, it's considered non-essential spend. And it sits in a category which is called below the line. And some of, the biggest banks, and we can comment because we're in the US and we're also in Canada, and many are the ones who are making sure that everyone has these certifications, and they're the biggest culprits of brand fill. And so it's the kind of circular logic is absurd to me. And we had a conversation the other week, and you mentioned to me, and it was very casual how you said it. And we were talking about sustainable development goals. And you said, oh, yeah, this is how many of the UN Global Compact goals we support. And so could you just talk a little bit about that for a second?
Sure. I think there's 17 areas that they've listed, and we impact 14 of those positively. And I'll give you a couple examples. So like one of them is zero hunger. Most people think we're going to solve the hunger problem by just giving food away. And what we do is we create livable wage jobs so people have the money to buy food for their family. So we affect that one. Life below sea is another one. So basically, the ecosystem in the oceans, and so we affect that because we don't use hazardous materials in tanning our leather or making any of our material products. So there's the wastewater that in the factories that makes our products is basically a self-filtering loop. It gets reused and recycled. And so they're not disposing anything into the rivers or the oceans. Okay. Another one is like women's empowerment. Well, we're doing a lot of that. 80% of the people we serve are female, and we're creating empowerment jobs. You can just tick through each one of them. And I would argue that every one of those that we affect is linked somehow to the livelihood of in the work quality and the job quality and the income quality of the maker. Because poverty is not going to be solved by handouts and charitable giving. Yes, we need to give things away sometimes to give people, a quick start, or they're dying, so they need some food. But that's not the long game. And what we've done in the world, I think, is we've taken short-term solutions and turned those into long-term strategies, and they're not. And so when you just start caring about the livelihood of the maker and the quality of the factory and the working conditions and the income and the environment, you basically have a ripple effect on majority of those standards.
The supply chain and the integrity and the transparency of it, I mean, it all really comes down to people. And especially in your mission, I would encourage people who want to represent your product line to present the mission first, the work, and then show the product. Because if someone really wants to commit, as opposed to what I call sustainability or social responsibility theater, if they really want to commit, they can find the money for the right reasons.
Right. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you think the Made Free message is going to come into conflict with the Made in America message?
No, I don't think so. I get people will say often to me, "Hey, that's great. You're helping people in South Asia and India, but what about America?" And I would say, great question. There is a great need for America and American jobs, and we can look at that, but in the fashion space, that's a pretty tough one right now, at least the way it is with if you compare the cost and to be competitive in the world. Okay, though we're paying a wage that's 5x our competitors in South Asia, which is very significant. It's still a lot lower operating cost to make things in India than it is in the U.S. Though I will say that this is something that has been heavy on my heart for a long time. When I lived in Chicago, I often thought of what if we could be doing some manufacturing in Chicago at that time and creating jobs for people that are having a difficult time in life. And I've been revisiting that idea and that vision here in Western North Carolina, especially after our hurricane and the devastation of jobs. I went to a meeting last night, and it's projected that we're going to have unemployment of 9%. Our mission is to help the most vulnerable to being enslaved or trafficked. So most of the people we help are people that are very poor, that are at the brink of being tricked or sold into slavery. Now that scenario actually goes on in the United States too. It's not as prevalent, but we have had a huge rise in slavery actually in the U.S. in the last couple of years. There's been a lot of people, migrants, for example, that have come here and they've made a deal with the devil. Basically, they've basically said to their smugglers, I don't have the money to pay you, but I'm yours when I get there. And so there's a lot of that going on. And there's just, especially around here, there's a lot of poverty in the Appalachian area. And so some of that, if we can provide jobs for the super poor in this region, we are actually providing them freedom from being vulnerable to being used and abused and to getting into something that they don't want to.
And so I think, to not lose sight of that, and to the extent that the US needs to grow back the manufacturing capability, and that it needs to create good jobs, maybe the mission can expand, but the economics would change. And so I have one question about going from fashion, and the quality of these goods are very high quality. They're not luxury, but they're premium goods. And so that brings with it a price point that's in the premium range. And as you've moved into expanding your channels to market and you are focusing on the large corporate buyer, I'm just really curious as to how they connect that budget mindset with a ESG mindset and make the right decision, as opposed to what I think a lot of us are really used to is just, oh, that's too expensive. When we all know this will last a long, long, long time. I think one of the big things I see in our industry is we really need to get better at, and I think fashion has always been great at branding. They always have been very clear on who their audience is. Then you get into the corporate world, and that audience just becomes the general population of people who work. And they're all different, but they all have to come together in some common approach under the flag of their employer. And then this thing gets complex. And I do believe our industry, compared to advertising, compared to above the line, is so far behind in that research and that data and the analysis of that data. And I think that's kind of why we wallow a bit below the line instead of, making a bigger impact.
What I think has to change for that to happen is that we have to have conversations with a different audience within the corporation. It's right now, I would guess that the most common interface is between buyers and sellers.
Mm-hmm.
And as sellers, as we are trying to communicate something. We're trying to sell value, and a different value. And the only way I think we're gonna really pull this off is to sell it differently. And I think the buyer is not the customer. The buyer is just fulfilling a transactional role on behalf of the corporation. To me, the buyer is the HR director. It's the director of marketing and brand, the one that cares about the experience of their customers and their employees. So when you have a conversation with a director of marketing or a CEO, let's say even at a corporation, and you talk about the stuff we're talking about, they immediately get it, and they're like, who cares about price? We're talking about cost and value that's well beyond whatever price you want to put on this.
Mm-hmm.
And now price is not part of the conversation, really. It is to some degree, but it's more about value and impact on their company culture and their clients' experience and their clients' culture and the world in general. Very different conversation.
When we started talking about the Fabulist and putting together an idea for a model, we had a two-word statement, and it was curate great. And that's what started was, can we curate great? And it wasn't just an assortment of things. It was, can we curate great conversations, and can we curate great relationships? And can we do it in a way that helps educate and change things, and in our own little way? And starting off this way, to me, is a huge step. And I think if you start the right way, you have a good chance of finishing the right way. And we want to do this for a long time. And I do believe when we look back and we say this was our first video podcast on the Fabulist, I think we'll be really, really proud that we got to spend this time with you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful to be part of it.
I'm going to thank you. I mean, every conversation I have with you is a joy.
It's companies like yours, groups like yours, that's what it's going to take. People that are really willing to support and encourage us. Because I will say it gets lonely sometimes when you're, going after this big behemoth of an industry that's been doing things the same way for so long. And they don't, a lot of them don't really get it, or want to get it.
If somebody received your product, like what it would be the one thing, the most top of mind thing you'd want them to feel about the product?
What I tell people is there's a human behind that shirt or that bag. There's a livelihood behind that. It didn't just pop out of a machine. When they look at the product, they quickly go to wondering how the person who made it is doing.
This has been such a gift. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Yes, likewise. That's very exciting. I look forward to seeing what you guys do, where you take this.